Right, everyone, welcome. I'm going to give a few minutes to allow some other folks to jump on the call. So I do appreciate you being on time and all that. I promise I will get you out on time, if not early. So we'll just kind of sit tight here for a little bit. Hopefully the silence won't be too unnerving, but I'm going to give a few minutes here, maybe up to, I think, 3 or 4 minutes past the hour, and we'll get going. Oh, and just a little heads up too, this will be recorded, so if you miss any of it, you can refer back to it. I'll send it to everyone. I know a lot of folks have RSVP'd, but they may not actually be able to jump on. No worries, and you don't particularly need to take notes because it will be recorded. So while we're waiting, I'll just kind of give a little bit of an introduction to myself. I think most people probably have already checked me out a little bit, or some folks I'm actually going to know personally. But I am a chief marketing officer. I'm an independent marketer, strategist, and advisor. I target companies that are middle market, particularly here in Dallas. That's where I'm based. I generally look to serve firms that are in some sort of transition. Maybe they've had a capital event, a merger acquisition, new leadership, ownership, a reorg of some kind, something like that, where they've now come upon that inflection point in their business, and now they're needing to navigate a new territory. So that's kind of where I come in as a CMO. Basically, I'm a team leader. I develop the team, the marketing team. I'll hire them, and if the client already has a marketing team, I can come in and I can still develop them moving forward from that new territory that they're in. That's the one main way that I function. The other is as an advisor or marketing director of some kind. That's more along the lines of a project-based client. So, for example, one of my clients, they are in the corporate insurance and employee benefits space, and so they're wanting to put together an event that basically targets CFOs and wanting to present on what they do and how they do it. And so they are hiring me to put that event together for them. So in that case, I'm not acting as a CMO, but I would be an advisor of some kind, right? So, and I've got clients that are in financial services, some are nonprofits, some are not in financial services at all. I know that'll be the focus of this particular webinar, but my approach generally does not need to be in a specific vertical or industry. It kind of cuts across all of them. But we'll kind of get into that here in a minute. I think we're 12:04 now, so I think that'll be good. I think we can go ahead and kick this off. Make an adjustment here. I have made it so no one can come off of mute for now, but you do have access to the chat. I love questions, so if you have one, please definitely throw it in there, and I will try to catch them as they come in. There will be plenty of time for Q&A. If you've got any particular questions or that require maybe more in-depth answer, that's all good. We can kind of get around to that at the end, but please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go so you don't forget. And also remember, 99 times out of 10, someone else has the same question. So don't be shy. Drop your question in there, and I will try to answer it as best I can. So if you'll bear with me for a moment here, let me get my screen shared here. Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Okay, so how to market your financial services firm. And judging by the attendee list, I see most of you are in that particular space, so hopefully you're in the right room. This will be geared toward financial services firms, those that are private equity, M&A, bankers, CPAs, and the like, business developed people. This is for you, and we're going to be talking about content and collaboration. Those are the two main principles that make up my philosophy when it comes to marketing. And that is really what marketing is. It's not just about having super cool posts and all the SEO and that kind of stuff. Those are necessary, but that's really not what marketing is. What marketing really is about how you build relationships, plain and simple. It's how you build relationships with your client, but it's also how you build them with your stakeholders, with your ecosystem, right? And how you position your brand or your firm or your organization within it, right? So how you build those relationships with stakeholders is paramount, and that's what I'm really going to try to drive forward with this webinar, because it's something that's really often overlooked, especially content, but in that collaboration side, we tend to neglect the stakeholders, the vendors, suppliers, the distributors, our peers, and that's a big no-no. That's something that can change your business completely. And I focus on the exponential, not the incremental, right? So I focus on companies that are looking to transform in some way, and I can help them bring that about using content and collaboration. So it's those are two very powerful principles, and that's kind of how I approach my clients and such. So, and there are three particular problems that I know everybody has, and I'm going to address them. The first one is awareness, right? That's simply being on your client's radar, right? Them knowing that you're there in the first place. That's usually, I'd say, probably half the battle, right? If we just knew where to go, we could approach this company and maybe they could help us. Or if you're on the other side of it, if you are the business, it's like, man, if only our clients just knew we were there and we could address those problems, right? That would get you more clients and more revenue. Everyone would be happy. The second challenge is on what we call in marketing salience, right? So that's being top of mind, or having high share of mind. You're going to hear me say science a lot. That's what that means. It's like being able to come top of mind, kind of capitalizing on that availability heuristic or the availability bias, right? What's readily available. Does your client think of your firm or your brand only when they see your name? Because that's not very good, right? Or do they think about your brand in specific buying situations, right? That's pretty good. Or is your brand just readily top of mind because they're famous for some reason? You know, something like an Apple or Tesla or KKR, something along those lines, right? That's where you ultimately want to be, right? And so that's the second problem, is salience. The third problem is relationship, and this is a really tough one, and that's answering that question of why you, right? Why your firm? Why should I do business with you when there's so many others, right? I said earlier that I don't particularly focus on any industries, but I do try to, I do gravitate a little bit toward finance, maybe health, tech, and hospitality, because those are really, really, really competitive markets, and they're very commoditized, right? And they're highly saturated. So if I can, persuade a client to pick me up, it can be a tremendous value for them, because within those industries, it's very hard to stand out, but it's easy at the same time. And if you get it right, you can stand out, and you're gonna dominate everybody, right? And they also get an asset that very few others have, which would be me, right? Most of those types of firms don't hire marketing people, and if they do, they're not going to function the way that I do. So let's move into this a little bit here. So the first section is going to be on content, and that is, like I said, more than pictures and images and stuff like that. It's live and digital events, it's communications, it's education and information, right? So throughout this webinar, I'm going to reference several case studies, some of which are my own, some are those that I know about, to kind of give you some real world applications of these things. So, and I'm going to kind of go through this and tell you a little bit of a story here. And we're going to start with a financial advisor. We're going to call her Sarah. So Sarah, and I've got some notes here, so if you see me looking down, that's why. But Sarah is a financial advisor that runs her own firm, and she was looking for ways to connect with her clients more effectively, and kind of trying to address that first problem and the second problem of awareness and science, right? And so she knew after attending a content marketing webinar, such as this one, that how powerful it could really be if she could harness effective content and engaging with her clients and perspectives. And so what she started with, the transformation began with creating a newsletter that she started sending out on a monthly basis, right? And in that newsletter, she was including things like summaries to the latest market trends, changes in in the regulatory spaces, updates around laws and such. She was sharing updates about her company, new hires that she had, and community involvement with her firm in the particular region that she was at. And she was also very clever about including educational pieces, articles, and even a specific section that she called the tip of the month, which was sharing actionable advice on managing finances and stuff like that. And so the result there was that her clients began to really look forward to that newsletter, that communication every month, right? And they appreciated that communication, and it was personalized, right? So, and as you can kind of see there, that's what a newsletter does. It serves as a vehicle of engagement with your clients and your prospective clients, right? And it's a platform to deliver content like updates on your company and educational pieces, which is really what clients are looking for. They want to be educated, right? They want to be informed. And you're able to personalize as well with such a newsletter. Like I said, with Sarah, she was creating that tip of the month for her clientele. And she had a really dialed in client, so she knew who they were, and she was just simply serving them. And a lot of these things you're going to hear today they seem pretty common knowledge, but it's funny how common knowledge seldom is common, or at least commonly practiced, right? But that's kind of the point. It's back to basics, right? Creating that personalization, being regular with your communications with your client is huge, right? And I see a lot of financial service firms don't have this kind of communication with their clients. They don't have newsletters. They don't have any kind of information that they're really passing to their clients, and they tend to focus only on their company, which generally nobody cares about. They want to know what's going on in the world around them. They want to know if there's anything valuable that's going on that they need to maybe attend, or something that they need to know. And maybe they want to understand how your company fits into that. But generally, you want to create a more customer-centric or client-centric piece of content, right? You want to engage around them, not them engaging around you, right? So that's also something that I tend to see is the case, is it's not really focusing outwardly on the world that their clients live in, right? So moving forward with our story with Sarah, she found a lot of success with that newsletter. After that, the next thing that she focused on was building a resource hub. And what that looked like was building a resource page on her firm's website. And with it, she started creating more valuable pieces of content to share, and that can kind of demonstrate her skill and her team and their expertise and what they do and how they do it. That was through white papers and ebooks. They started creating video tutorials and interviews where they were taking short videos and explaining really complex financial concepts and breaking them down in an easy to understand manner, right? They were also able to create case studies and demonstrate their firm, their team, like I said, and kind of how they showcase their real world applications of their advice, right? And so when you build out a resource page, and I do see a lot of firms that have this, but I see a lot that don't too. I see lots of financial service firms that have no resource page at all, and it's really just kind of a landing page that has their logo on it, and that's about it. I see that often, but this is where you can really stand out and separate. And again, going back to those two first problems of awareness and salience, right, being top of mind. If you're able to constantly deliver valuable information, you will be top of mind, right? And it also addresses that third problem of the relationship. Why you? Why should I pick you? Because you have all the value. You've got all the information, all the education that I need, and all of the answers to the questions that I have, right? You can answer them with content like this, like a white paper or research paper of some kind, or case studies or interviews. Not only that, but it demonstrates your credibility and it raises your visibility, which ultimately leads to profitability, right? And you can kind of see there, it also touches on SEO, those benefits there of improving your search ranking, attracting more traffic, which is something that Sarah experienced as well when she created this resource page, or this hub of information, as it drove traffic to her website more through search. And just a fun fact for you guys, I think it's 93 or 95% of internet activity starts on a search page or on a search engine of some kind, right? That's a lot of that's a lot of opportunity for your content to hit, right? So Sarah was able to benefit there. Potential clients started finding her firm, and that was, they were able to find out more about her firm and what they can do and what benefits that they might derive from working with her. So after all of that, she didn't stop there. The next thing that she did was engaging the community with live events, right? So webinars and workshops, conferences. One notable event was a webinar that she put together on navigating market volatility, which drew in a huge crowd. And the way she was able to do that was by collaborating with some of her peers to cross promote. It helped in credibility of the event, and it also drove in more people from sides that she wouldn't have ordinarily had access to, or basically accessing new markets. All right, hopefully that makes sense. She was able to engage the audience, of course, with the Q&A and the content or the subject matter, which further established her as a leader in her space, right? That positioned her as a thought leader, was having that content and basically corralling her peers and her stakeholders into that event to help support with it, right? And so they're able to share costs, they're able to share the risks and all that kind of fun stuff. And it's, the response that she got was overwhelmingly positive, right? They helped build some deeper connections with the audience, and it attracted new clients for her. So I've got a couple of case studies down there. BlackRock Investment Forum, they work with Microsoft, and they attract over 500 industry leaders and technologists, policymakers. Maybe you guys have heard of some of these. And they're discussing data analytics integration and how that pertains to investment management. Or PwC, their conference with Google is massive, and they're discussing some of the same kind of content, but that's because it's relevant, right, in the business world. But you can see that at the bottom, it attracts 100,000 virtual attendees. I don't know about you, but if my firm or my brand were able to attract 100,000, there's not quite that many on this webinar, but if there were 100,000 attendees, I'm pretty sure that would impact not only my visibility and credibility, but also my revenue too, right? I'd be very happy to attract 100,000 people with a single event. That's the power of collaboration though, and that's the power of content, right? And again, I want to bring your attention to this. That addresses all three of those problems I called out at the beginning, that being awareness, the science, being top of mind, and having share voice, and having that relationship of to answer the question, why should I pick you? If your firm is attracting large numbers or leaders, it's not always about numbers, right? If they're attracting high quality leaders and influencers in your space, right? That's why you want to work with that firm, because they're leading, right? That's kind of how that works. So that's kind of the content piece. Now, I got a couple real quick case studies I'll touch on from my own experiences. Some time ago, I was working with a firm or brand that was, they were in the automotive world, and this was here in Dallas. And they were a completely new brand. They were wanting to put together car shows and events for the auto enthusiasts. And they were brand new, and they wanted to become big, of course, right? So the strategy that we employed was to collaborate, right? Content for sure, but also collaborating. That was the key, because it was like in the financial services space, it was highly fragmented. There were a lot of players, lots of brands, lots of clubs and stuff like that, lots of events. So the question is, how do we step into this and dominate it? How do we win? So the approach was to be collaborative, right? So we started engaging some prominent brands, some that were more on the fringe side of things, they were a little bit smaller, and started scooping up support and creating alliances and such. Within about a year and a half, that brand was the dominant brand in the Metroplex, and they were boasting over 100 vehicles in attendance to their weekly events, which at the time was massive for that space, right? 150 attendees every single week. That was massive. Okay, they were a dominant brand. for sure. Everyone knew who they were. And it was through that collaboration, right? And it was able to be achieved really quickly. Another one experience that I had from last year, a brand had created a networking event, and they were doing really well. They had done 2 of them already by the time I had gotten involved. They'd done 2 of them already. They were doing really well, and they wanted to double the size of this event and raise its awareness and so on and so forth. And so, with no financial resources at all, we set out to do just that, to double it through collaboration again, and some strategic engagements. We were able to not only double the attendance of that event, but we went 50% beyond that, right? So 1.5 times. It was pretty awesome, and one of the 2 best things, one, both brands made 100% ROI, right? Because we didn't have to really, there weren't a whole lot of financial resources behind it to begin with, but because of such a high attendance, both sides won a lot of money, right? But 2, 50% or so of the attendees of this event were new to both brands. So both brands were able to access new markets they wouldn't have ordinarily accessed before. There again, the power of collaboration, the power of content, right? Live events and such, and working together and sharing resources, hitting those problems, awareness and science, and then the relationship one, right? Why do you want to work with that firm or that brand? Because they're the dominant one. They're leading the conversation and the narrative, right? So let's kind of shift gears here a little bit. We're going to move into section 2, and hopefully I'm not going too fast. I haven't seen anything come through on the chat. But if anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop them and check this real fast and make sure there's nothing I need to answer. Okay, good. All right. Feel free to stop me. I know I move quickly. So collaboration is the next section, right? And I've already kind of been talking about that, but these are some of the points that you want to explore. Is that co-creation, JVs, working with your stakeholders, and business support organizations. So I've got another story for you. We're going to call this individual John, and he too works at a mid-sized financial advisory firm targeting middle market firms, right? Of course. But he also understood that collaboration could unlock new opportunities for growth. And so his journey began when he noticed that other firms were able to successfully leverage their partnerships and reach new markets and capabilities and such. So the first thing that he set out to do was creating partnerships. So he had his firm partner with a technology supplier, one of their vendors, and they co-hosted a series of workshops focusing on digital transformation and finance. The tech company was obviously able to provide insights and tools, technologies, and stuff like that, while John was able to share more on how to actually apply some of these resources for financial planning as well as investment management, right? And the benefits were, of course, like you kind of see here on my slide, they were able to pool their expertise, pool their contacts as well. So they were able to share with the invite lists and kind of have a really solid series of workshops with attendance, and creating a more comprehensive event because they were sharing resources from two different industries and spaces. And they were also able to co-promote each other or cross-promote each other and kind of share in the costs of putting that event together. And it significantly increased both of their visibility and engaging their client bases, right? So, and something else, another side note that I kind of want to touch on, I think will be familiar to everyone in this room or on this call. It takes on average, I think depending on where you look, 20 to 25 touch points when it comes to B2B, right? Especially when it's in things like capital raising or transactions. It takes around, that's the average, is 20 to 25. Some resources may say even higher than that. So I want you to think about those touch points. And that's not all but touch points are all the things like when you're emailing, when you're making phone calls, going to lunch, when your prospective client is engaging with your content, again, when they're reading any articles about you or reports or webinars, those are all touch points, right? So if you want to whip through those touch points faster, I would advise you to create the content around it and create those opportunities to have the touch points through collaboration and creating opportunities to collide, right? One of my mentors taught me interaction fuels action. Okay, I would write that one down. Interaction fuels action. So you need to create opportunities where you can interact and engage and collide with your peers, your suppliers, your clients, and so on, right? Um, and that's how you can get to those touch points quicker. Another fun fact for you is when it comes to B2B or even B2E, which education, it takes on average 10 assets to be consumed by your buyer or your client. And that's an asset, like this webinar is one asset. So I've still got 9 more to go before any one of you will probably raise your hand and say, hey, James, I'd like to come and work with you, right? That's a long time for anyone. That's your sales cycle, right? And on average there too, most sales cycles in B2B or B2E are, I think something like 500 days or a little bit over a year. You know, it's pretty lengthy sometimes. Sometimes it can be a lot shorter, but generally it's around there, you know. So you got to be really aware of the fact that the information you're putting out, the content you put out, you know, it's going to hit people at different times, which is why you want to have a lot of it. So when it comes to content, I always like to say, he who has the most content wins, because you got to remember, while you may be putting out 100 or 1,000 pieces of content in a year, your client may not see them, right? You know, and another fun fact for you is only roughly 5% of buyers are actually in the market to buy at that time. So you're contending against 95% of people are not looking to buy your thing or become a client of yours in the first place, right? So you've got to build a relationship over time, right? And so I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir with most of you guys, but it still bears repeating and kind of bringing your attention to it. 80-90% of the buyer journey or the client journey is already gone through from the client before they even engage you and say, hey, I would like to work together, you know, because the odds are you were shortlisted amongst many others. So you want to be on the short list, right? This is how you do it. Again, content, being aware, having your client be aware of you, having that top of mind position, and how you collaborate to answer that question, why they should work with you, right? So sorry to kind of go off there a little bit, but I think that it's very important to drive that point home, right? So just kind of coming back here to the slides here, I know that you can see that equation up there, relationship plus consistent action. Because we all have relationships. I hear this all the time. When I start talking about collaboration, people will say, oh yeah, we've got a ton of relationships, you know, da, da, da. That's not the point. You got to have the other half of the equation. That's the consistent action. You know, you got a relationship with your spouse, but if you never talk to them, you never engage with them, you never go out with them, you never find out what they're doing, how long do you think the relationship's going to last, right? Consistent action is the other part of that. It's key. Like I said, interaction fuels action. That's the difference between a relationship and a collaboration, because one is active. And my rule of thumb is you should be engaging and collaborating with your stakeholders quarterly, if possibly not even, if not more than that. But if you haven't engaged with them in over a quarter, you're overdue for sure. So I just want to point out real quick before I move to the next slide, this other case study here with Apple and Goldman Sachs with the Apple Card. That was a wonderful collaboration. I'm sure most of you are aware of that. It was ranked highest among issuers with an 864 score. They were able to build 10 billion in deposits since they launched, and they were able to garner 3 million users in the first year. So, I mean, who would have thought to partner Goldman Sachs and Apple, right? What could they possibly have to what business could they share together, right? You know, they created their own card, right? And it was very cost effective. That last bullet point down there, their acquisition cost was low because of their marketing channels that Apple already had. So that's the kind of things that I want to encourage you guys to think about too. And that's how I work with my clients, is how do we get outside the box? Who can we engage with? Who can we do business with that can position us to be dominant and to bring forth something to the market that is not there already, right? How do we not create demand, but how do we capture demand that's already there in a different way, right? These are some of the things that you can come upon when you JV or when you co-host or you build partnerships together and start initiatives, right? That's the idea. Creating that network and that ecosystem of complementary businesses and then doing things together. So with our story with John, as he was expanding his collaborative efforts, He built his network of complementary businesses like legal firms and HR and tech vendors and such, and he referred to that as his monopoly community. And he was able to serve his clients in a more holistic way, like you might imagine. And so this is your monopoly community right here. I've mentioned that in some of my advertising for this event, how to dominate your space and create a monopoly ethically, right? Your vendors, your suppliers, your peers, interacting with them and creating these partnerships, these JV opportunities and co-marketing, creating access to events and network and access to certain markets, providing them incentives to do that and work with you, payouts, maybe rewards, recognition, even. These are all ways that you can engage with your stakeholders, right? And serve your clients better, right? If you come to a market, it's significantly easier to dominate that market with friends and allies and partners. I mean, it's simple math, right? Monopoly, the game, is significantly easier to win when you're partnering with someone else on the game, right? The game is over pretty quick. So that's the idea, is building out that community that you can readily call on, and not just when you need something from them, but when they might need something from you, or just simply engaging them because you're friends in the first place. You know, we do that with our individual friends, right? Like, hey, what are you doing? Let's go to the bar. Okay, cool. It's the same thing, but companies, brands rarely do that casually. You know, find a reason to engage with them and see what happens. Okay, that's the idea. That's how I work. That's what I encourage my clients to do, and I do that on their behalf as well. So in effect, once you hire me, for example, you're not just hiring me to solve the immediate problem, like maybe creating some content or maybe creating a handful of events and having some sponsors and stuff like that. It's also about building the relationships from your brand into your community, your ecosystem. That's what you're bringing me on for, or that's at least what I'm going to deliver you as well. Is that better positioning, right? That's the name of the game. So one of the organizations that I worked with last year, they were a nonprofit organization, and their organization was basically on the brink of failing, or it had already failed, but it was on the brink of basically closing down. And then I stepped in and I pretty much turned it around. The way that I did that was collaborating and then putting out content that was a lot more effective. This organization hadn't done anything in about 10 years. So it was completely dormant, basically. Now it's one of the most connected organizations in the Metroplex in its space, with more than a dozen partners and other organizations that some are very large, some are not that large, but they're still very key. And they're partnered with them in multiple ways. They've got relationships with 3 major universities, and they've launched pilot programs with all of them. This organization is now running very well, right? It's still in growth mode, but it's significantly better positioned and much more high profile than it was when I came upon them, right? And again, it was about this right here. This particular slide is the monopoly community. It was partnering and basically JVing and co-marketing things and putting things together with other organizations and other people as well, right? That was what really ultimately turned it around. So we move down to this last couple of slides here, just to recap. So this webinar was designed to teach you how to stand out, how to make your firm stand out, and how to lead and dominate your space. And so those 3 pieces up there of content, having the newsletter, that's to communicate, right? Your resource page educates. Your live events and your digital events create an experience, right? And they create a platform to engage, that interaction, fueling action again, right? As well as tackling those first couple of problems I highlighted at the beginning of awareness, right? That puts you top of mind and addresses the salience part. And if you do it right and you're consistent with it, that can build you into what we refer to in marketing as the fame position, where your clients don't just think about you in buying situations. You're just top of mind and have a lot of share of voice as it is. And the answer of why we should work with you is already answered by your collaborations, because you lead and you dominate your space. You bring your entire network and the ecosystem to bear on the problem for your clients, right? You gotta identify and engage that community with partnerships and JV opportunities, right? That's how you dominate and lead in your industry, and how you can stand out amongst a sea of firms that, for the most part, in a client perspective, they look the same and they talk the same and they act the same, right? That's how you do that. So as far as your next steps, very easy. Meet with me one-on-one. So we can explore some of the options that you have and the resources you have available. And we can kind of talk about and unpack your particular firm, the resources, and where you want to go. Because I and my clients don't look to compete, we look to dominate. And this is how we do it. I'm pretty readily open about that with most of my content. If you are following me on social media anywhere, particularly LinkedIn, you'll see that that's all I talk about, is how to position, how to share content, how to engage with your peers, your stakeholders, sometimes even your competitors are great stakeholders to work with, right? So go ahead and stop sharing this here. But that's the idea, is to create a collaborative environment for your business, for your brand, and dominate from there. And creating that content is absolutely key. So I think I have saved you roughly 20 minutes on your lunch. So if there are any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. This is recorded as well, so it will be sent out to your emails, so you'll have it to review. And I'll be sure to share this as well on social media, my YouTube channel. I'll put this up there so you can rewatch it 1,000 times if you like. So hopefully you didn't have to take too many notes. But that pretty much concludes my webinar for today. I do appreciate you all jumping on here. I'm not going to particularly share anything else from this point. I just kind of want to leave some time on the clock that I can either return to you, or you can feel free to send me any questions. I will go ahead and close down the recording for this part, though. And I do appreciate you being on this webinar. Thank you so much.